Hey, I'm Rob from JestaThaRogue.com. I'm going to show you how to play Slay the Spire, the board game. This is a game for 1 to 4 players, plays in about 60 to 180 minutes, is designed by Gary Dworteski, Anthony Giovanetti and Casey Yano, and is published by Contention Games. Slay the Spire is a roguelike video game where players travel up a digital map using deck building of digital cards to defeat digital enemies they encounter along the way. Slay the Spire, the board game, is a cooperative board game that has players travel up a cardboard map using deck building with real cards to defeat card enemies they encounter along the way. Defeat the boss in the final act you play to win the game. Now help me slay the algorithm by clicking like and share and leaving a comment, and also let's build a community by hitting subscribe. On to setup. Take the Act 1 board, pick a random side. Shuffle the map tokens, randomly place them on the space on the board, placing the light tokens on the light spaces and dark tokens on the dark spaces face down, then flip them all face up. Place the character figure, represented by a green boot, at the bottom space of the board. Randomly choose an Act 1 boss by rolling the die and selecting the Act 1 boss with that number on the back of their card and placing it face down on the boss space at the top of the Act 1 board. Put out the player aid. Shuffle the boss relic, and potion decks and lay them out. Place the Act 1 summons deck underneath. This deck does not need to be shuffled as it will be looked through when required. Put the Act 1 first encounter cards to one side. The other Act 1 encounter cards are shuffled next to the summons. Then also place the Act 1 Elite deck and Act 1 Event deck face down. Place the shuffled Curse deck face down underneath with the Days and Status decks, which do not need to be shuffled and can be face up. Players get a character, each with a unique deck, ability and playstyle. The Ironclad and the Silent are the easiest to play. The Defect is harder and the Watcher is the hardest. Some of these characters have setup steps that are not explained on the character board or in the character section of the rulebook, so be sure to fully understand your character before you start playing. Take the board, mini, a starter deck with a grey border, a rewards deck with a black border, and a rare rewards deck with a gold border of your chosen character. Shuffle each deck and keep the starter deck next to the player board. Keep the rewards decks nearby. Put a red cube on 3 energy, 0 block, and the maximum HP. Each character has a different symbol for energy, but they are used interchangeably throughout the game. Players put a mini in their space on the right of the act board. Shuffle the Niao's Blessing deck. Deal 1 to each player. They get the bonuses in red and pick one of the bonuses in blue. I'll explain most of these later in the video. If playing solo, also gain 2 money and the loaded die solo relic. Relics are kept with potions near your player board in the item area. On to gameplay. Players will resolve the starting space of Act 1, then move up one of the lines and resolve the next space, and repeat this until the boss and the act is defeated or an endgame condition is met. There are 7 room types, and the first room in each act is always the same, so we'll start with that one. Encounter, shown with this icon, is of a monster with 2 small horns, contains standard enemies. Place 1 enemy from the top of the deck in each player's row. For the first encounter in Act 1 only, use the 4 first encounter cards. Search for the summons if there are any in the green bar at the bottom of the card. For example, for this small slime, search the summons deck for an acid slime and place it to the right in the row. If there are multiple summons with the same name, choose one randomly. Some, like this sneaky gremlin, will summon a number of gremlins. Randomly choose those from the summon deck using only those cards with the gremlin icon on the back. Put cubes on the numbers with the yellow outline for their starting HP. Some, like this large slime, will have over 10 HP. So here you'll put 1 cube on the 10 and 1 cube on the 2, remove the cube from the 10 when they go below 10 HP. Some, like this goblin knob, have a cube action. Put a cube on the topmost slot. Once these combat style encounters have been set up, play can begin. They are made up of several rounds of player turns and enemy turns. A player turn has 3 phases: start of turn, play, and end of turn. The start of turn phase has 4 steps, and the first is to reset the player board back to 3 energy and 0 block. Step 2 is to draw 5 cards from your deck. If your deck runs out, shuffle your discard pile into a new deck and continue drawing. It's possible you may have cards in your hand from the previous player turn. You still draw 5 cards, there is no hand size limit. Step 3 is to roll the die. This will determine the enemy and artifact card actions for the round. More on those later, but if you have the ability to change the value of the die, you must use it now. Step 4 is to activate any start of turn abilities. For example, Demon Form gives you a strength token at the start of the turn. Start of combat triggers now, in the first round of combat only. For example, the Blood Vial allows you to heal 1 HP at the start of combat. More on strength tokens and HP later, but remember, start of turn is the start of every turn, the start of combat is only in that first round of combat. Die relic abilities trigger now. For example, the loaded die will give the player a block on the roll of a 4 or 5 and will trigger a die relic ability on a 6, including itself. Next is the play phase, where players can play cards, use potions, and use abilities in any order they choose. To play a card, pay the cost of the energy in the top left and resolve it. Resolve the card from top to bottom, left to right. Abilities are triggered once the card is fully resolved. Powers, like Feel No Pain, will stay in play face up until the end of the encounter. Cards that say Exhaust, like Warcry, will be resolved and then added to the exhaust pile and will not be available again this encounter. Most other cards are resolved and then discarded to the discard pile. While a card is being played, it doesn't count as being in your hand or your discard pile. Some cards, like this Daze, are unplayable and cannot be played at all. Let's look at the common symbol on the cards. Hit, deal the amount of damage shown. Move the damage counter down that many spaces on the target. When attacking, a player can target any enemy in any row, including the row belonging to another player. Area of effect. Affects everything in the row. For example, Cleave will deal 2 damage to all enemies in the row. Enemies that attack with an aura effect will target all players. Some attacks will add effects to the attacker or the target. Vulnerable will give a vulnerable token to the target per icon. For example, Bash will hit the target for 2 damage, then give the target a vulnerable token. A target with a vulnerable token will take double damage with their next hit, and then 1 token is discarded. Weak will give a weak token to the target per icon. For example, Disarm will give the target 2 weak tokens. A character can have a maximum of 3 of these tokens. The next hit does -1 damage, then remove 1 token. If a character with weak attacks a target with vulnerable, they cancel each other out, removing 1 of each token. Strength. Some actions, like Inflame, give the user strength, and the character can have a maximum of 8 of these tokens. Each adds +1 to the hit, and they are not discarded. So if you hit for 1 and you've got 3 strength tokens, you'll deal 4 damage. Strength is applied before you double the damage against a vulnerable target. Some attacks, like Twin Strike, hit multiple times against 1 target unless stated. Strength applies to each of these hits, but as it's only 1 attack, only 1 vulnerable and 1 weak token will be discarded for this 1 attack card. Cards like Wild Strike and some enemy abilities will daze the player. They gain a daze card and put it on top of their deck. Block. Gain that many block on the player board. For example, Defend gives you 1 block. There is a maximum of 20 block for players. Put a block token next to your track if you go over 10 as a reminder. Enemies use tokens to show how much block they have. For each 1 damage dealt, remove 1 block token. When a target runs out of block, then you start removing HP. Keep in mind, block only prevents damage from hits and damage effects like this Combust skill. It won't prevent effects that ask you to lose life, such as Rupture that allows you to gain 1 strength, but you lose 1 HP. You also gain the effects of any attack like Daze or Weak, even if you block all the damage. Just remember that while block can go over the track on the player board, both HP and energy are capped at their maximum. All tokens, including gold, are limited to the number you have in the supply, so if you would gain some and there are none left, just ignore the effect. Also, if you don't like this simultaneous play, there is an optional rule where the player in the bottom row of the act board will act first, and then players will take their turn in clockwise order around the table. When all players are done, this phase ends. In any order, end of turn action triggers now. For example, Metallicize allows the player to gain 1 block. Cards in hand with Ethereal are exhausted. In this case, Daze will go back to the Daze pile of cards. Players discard all cards in hand in any order. Some cards, like Well Laid Plans, allow you to retain a card, meaning it is not discarded at the end of turn. After this is the enemy's turn, which is also in 3 phases. Remove enemy block, take enemy actions, and move cube actions. First, remove any block tokens from all enemies. Next, enemies activate starting with the highest row on the board and going left to right. Some, like this fat gremlin, just attack as normal. Others, like this acid slime, will attack depending on the value of the die rolled at the start of the player's turn. Some, like this gremlin knob, will activate depending on the current position of the cube. For example, in this round, the gremlin knob will gain enrage for the rest of combat. This is explained on the card. Most of the common enemy actions are the same as the player actions, which we've already covered, but there is one I want to cover on its own. There are 2 status icons, the green swirly icon shown on the slime boss and the yellow flame icon on the hexaghost. These put 1 card per shown icon into your discard pile. Like the Daze cards, all status cards are the same and have 2 effects. The effect active for this combat depends on the icon shown on the enemy. Step 3 is to move the cube actions. If an enemy has a cube action, slide the cube down 1 space. When it gets to the bottom, slide it up to the topmost red slot. Grey slots are not repeated and are only activated once per combat. Once all enemies have been activated, go back to the player turn. When an enemy is reduced to 0 HP, it loses all tokens and is flipped face down. Combat ends when all monsters are dead or have left combat, then follow the end of combat steps. Any end of combat abilities trigger now, then players gain the reward shown in the upper left of the enemy of the row you are in. Rewards are gained in any order and may be skipped. Gold, gain that much gold. Card reward, look at the top 3 cards from your reward deck add one to your deck, and return the rest to the bottom of the deck. For this and any reward, you get to view all the rewards before deciding which one to pick. If the golden ticket is revealed, replace it with the top card from the rare rewards deck. Unpicked rare rewards are returned to the bottom of that deck. Rare reward is the same as a reward, but from the rare rewards deck. Potion. Draw a potion card and either keep it or discard it. A player can hold 3 potions. If they're already holding 3 potions, they may replace a potion they already own, or they can give it to another player who has fewer than 3 potions. You can only give them to another player out of combat. Discarded and used potions go to the bottom of the deck when used. Some can be used outside of combat. Relic. Either keep it or discard it. Discarded relics go on the bottom of the deck. The next step is to reset the deck. Remove any status or daze cards back to their respective decks, return any powers in play to the deck, shuffle the deck, discard and exhaust pile together. Then reset the player board back to 0 block and 3 energy. HP is not reset and stays where it is. Now clear enemies. Enemies go back to the bottom of their encounter deck, summons go back into their deck. At this point and any time up to the next combat begins, players could change rows on the act board. Okay, that's how combat works. Let's look at the next 2 room types that are both combat related. These are the elites, shown with the monster with the bigger horns, and the boss, which is the big card placed at the top of the board. Some elites, like Le Goblin, have a lot of HP. Set their health using cubes on the HP track for the player count. In this case, it would be 66 HP for a 3-player game. Elites are placed on the bottom row with summons placed to their left. For example, sentries are placed on the bottom row, and the sentry summons alternate A, B, A, B, etc. until each player has 3 enemies. The boss is set up in a similar way to the elites, with summons placed to their left, but the boss is considered to be in all rows. Some bosses, like the Guardian, have modes, and the card will tell you how to change modes. When changing modes, move the cube to the top row of the new mode. One key difference between elites and bosses compared to your standard encounters is that all players will gain the reward for defeating the elite and the boss. Bosses have a boss relic, reveal 1 per player, 3 if playing solo. Everyone may gain 1, unpicked relics are discarded to the bottom of the boss relic deck. On to the next room type, Campfire. Players either rest to heal 3 HP or smith to upgrade a card. To upgrade a card, choose a card in your deck, remove it from the sleeve and flip it over to the upgraded side with the green text. Treasure chest. Each player gains a relic. Simply draw 1 from the top of the deck and put it in your play area. The question mark is for an event. Draw 1 event card from the deck and each player resolves that card individually and then puts it to the bottom of the deck. For cards with choices shown in yellow like the living wall, each player will pick one. If a card asks you to pay or give something, you need to be able to pay and give that in full to be able to get the reward. The living wall has examples of other card actions. To remove a card, simply choose a card from your deck and remove it from the game into a separate removed pile. To transform a card, remove a card from your deck and add the top card of the reward deck to your deck instead. If the game card is the golden ticket, return the golden ticket to the bottom of the rewards deck and add the top card of the rare reward deck instead. If asked to gain a curse, draw the top curse card and add it to your deck. The money bag is a merchant. Flip over the player aid to make it the merchant board. Put 3 relics on the relic deck into the top 3 spots and 3 potions from the potion deck on the bottom 3 spots of the merchant board. Each player also reveals the top 3 cards of their rewards deck. Players can buy relics and potions with gold for the amount shown on the bottom right of the card. The relic in the top left is on sale for 1 fewer gold than the cost shown. When buying your own reward cards, common cards with a grey banner cost 2 gold, uncommon with a blue banner are 3 gold, and rare cards with a yellow banner are 6 gold. Also, once per player per merchant, each player can pay 3 gold to remove a card from the deck from the game to the removed pile. Players can share money for events and merchants, and any unpurchased card will go on the bottom of its respective deck. When defeating the boss of Act 1, you'll move on to Act 2 and then Act 3. So let's look at setup steps for a new act. Replace the act decks and board with the relevant act and set up the tokens and boss as normal. Heal all players to max HP. Shuffle the black bordered reward cards, upgraded cards, relics, potions, etc. and carry on to the next act. If one player is reduced to 0 HP, everyone loses. There is an optional rule called the last stand where if a player dies in a boss battle, the game continues. More about that on page 23 of the rulebook. The game ends in victory when a player defeats the boss of Act 1, Act 2 or Act 3, depending on how many acts you decided to play at the beginning of the game. And when starting a new run, remember to reset all upgraded cards and deck back to the normal side, and that's how you play Slay the Spire, the board game. Thanks for watching. Remember to like, share, subscribe and hit the notification bell so you know when a new video goes live. You can follow me on Insta, Twitch and YouTube at JestaThaRogue and find the blog at JestaThaRogue.com. I've been Rob aka JestaThaRogue and I'll see you soon.